Natalia, taking a look now at your project from week 7, and your title page looks very good, so that's a great start. Very nice. The title should go here as well, but that's not too big of a deal. I know the exemplar doesn't show that, so it's kind of the exemplar's fault, but technically speaking, the title should go on page 2 as well. So, but we won't worry about that. So, let's see how you did here. If given the choice between Okay, so something in a statement like this, you could probably just start with given. Given the choice between time and money, which would you choose? Would it be too much to ask to have both? Beat the clock. So good way to start. Interesting question. Good. Beat the clock. Now, beat the clock is an article title, so it should not be in italics. It should actually be in quotation marks. Again, that's not a big deal, but just for your future reference, just for your knowledge. All right. Beat the Clock by Catherine, and it probably ought to have a comma. Probably ought to have a comma here between to set off Tyler, because I think you would need a comma here and here, although I don't know if that's necessarily a major deal. Beat the Clock by Catherine Tyler discuss. Yeah, you might not have to have it there, but technically speaking, I think it would need the commas, but I'm not going to worry about that either. Discuss the possibility of living with both money and time through proper time management training. Throughout the article, so let's see, throughout the article, okay, the fact that you refer to her, say that she's discussing things, tells me that, tells me the genre is probably informational. Um, Topic, I think, is clear by those things, by what you say here as well. Purpose, I think, is covered as well here. By exploring better time management skills, we can witness a higher activity rate due to lower stress. Okay, so this, I'm going to assume that this is about employees as well. Um, Beat the clock. I can't remember for sure who her specific audience was, but it looks like you chose employees. You have a quote here. Good. You don't need the November there. You could just put the year. I think would have been good enough. But the year, when you're doing APA, the year should always go with the author. So what y'all probably ought to have here would just be the year here and then the page number. Um, Assuming that this is part of because you don't have it within the quotation marks here, so, but I'm assuming that's supposed to be part of this um, parenthetical. So should be Tyler. You've the only thing you need is her last name, so it should be in parentheses here. You should have the parenthesis mark here, and then it should be say Tyler, comma, 2003, comma, P period, space 03, 103. That's what it should look like, okay? Just for future reference. Sometimes productivity. Okay, so here you are talking about both, and I think I probably told you in my in my feedback to you on other assignments in previous weeks that you really should narrow that down to one specific group. But it looks to me like you just chose employees, which is pretty much everybody, right? Everybody's probably one or the other, unless they're an actual business owner or something. So that's way too broad of an audience. Um, However, you've got it delineated in there and everything, so I can still give you meats because you do at least have it mentioned. All right. Historical and cultural reference. I don't see anything in the way. Like I said, okay, so there's some historical cultural reference right there in the 20th century. Yeah. Okay, so now this looks like it comes from her source. If this is something she states and you just put it into your own words, then this should still be treated as a citation and it should have a parenthetical stating what it should have. You don't want to use her first name. You always want to use last name of the authors in papers like this. So here, when you say Tyler argues, it should be Tyler um, 2003. You always want to keep that in APA. You always want to keep that year right there with the author's names. The author's name. So it should be Tyler, and then a set of parentheses with 2003 in it. And then here it should be the page number in parentheses also. Page number, P period, and whatever the number is. So, let's see. Core idea, I think, is noted in here. So now we're getting to the body paragraphs. This is run with more details, and you do have some details, although you don't really have much citations. So your details are good, but your evidence is not really there as strong as it should be because you're not really citing her. You're stating stuff that she says, but you're not putting it in citations. And that makes it vague. It makes it unclear as to whether or not you're quoting her or not, or paraphrasing her or not. And that means that's, of course, the problem there again is the fact that you don't have these where you're talking about what she says or does. Um, but you do have the citations here, so that's better. I'll go ahead and bring this up here because you do have some citations there in that next paragraph. Dedicating our lives to a career, and so that's your conclusion, I'm assuming, yeah. Okay, so and then you have your reference page. It's not hanging indented, but otherwise it looks fine. Um, this should be in quotation marks. It should not be italicized, and the quotation mark should start here, and then the closing quotation mark be here, of course. And then if there was a URL or anything like anything else in the way of like my volume or issue or anything like that, it should have gone here too. So I'm not sure if this is a complete. Doesn't look like it might not be a totally complete entry, like have everything it should have. All right, let's get to your second paper, which um, should have been on the same. Should have been all in one document, but that's not a terrible big deal. But it just makes me have to go to the second document here and reline it up and everything. So for business owners, good. So there you definitely clarified who your new audience is, and that's great. And again, the title should be here, but no big deal. Also, note that how far this is right here, that's way too much space. It should be, left margin is probably actually right around here. So that's definitely all tabbed in too far. But that's just a minor thing. New audience. So in this first part, you were supposed to actually talk about the new audience and state who they are, so you don't do that. So I actually can't give you credit for that. You state who the new audience is here, but that's all you do is just state that it's business owners. There should have been, if you look at the exemplar, you'll see that it should have been a paragraph where you actually discuss why you chose this audience, why they are going to, how they're going to benefit, and stuff like that. So it should have been a much more thorough discussion here, rather than just part of a title. Um, let's see how you did with everything else here, though. It doesn't seem like you've done anything much different in the introduction. You've even got the same thesis statement, so you're not really changing things, at least certainly not enough in the introduction to touch on or to address a second different audience. Now here you do talk about business owners, so that's better. Okay. There's a more particular way to actually when an author refers to another author in their writing, that's called source within a source. Really, that's what I call source within a source. So if you were to do a search in the Shapiro library for how to cite a source within a source, it would probably bring you to something that would show you how to actually do this. And the way it works is, since stack is mentioned in author in Tyler's work, you would probably have, um, according to Laura Stack, who was referenced in Tyler's work, Tyler's article, and then you could just put the page number here. Um, but that's not a terrible big deal. Uh, Same, it looks like the same stuff here. See, this should have been changed to actually address, like, use wording that would be more um, geared toward. You could use verbs and language, address, different adjectives, things like that that would show your respect for and your addressing of the probably more knowledgeable audience, which would be the business owners. Um, so you have some, but it's just not quite enough to really have made it feel like you did a lot of alteration to make it fit this new audience. So, um, audience needs, I'm going to have to take some off of that. Writing situation, some off of that. Writing style is fine. Well, I have to take a little bit off of it because the writing style has to do with the new audience too. Writing conventions, communication is clear. Citations are mostly very good. So you still ended up with a good grade. You ended up with a B. So good job, Natalia, overall. And just keep some of these things I mentioned in this video in mind for anything that you might have to do in the future. Because any writing you do in the future, some of it might apply. And other than that, I will go ahead and end this video right here.